My name is Samantha Blake, and I am 31 years old today. 6 hours after giving birth, my father, Richard Blake, walks in. He looks at my newborn daughter, Lily Blake, like she is a mistake. Then he smirks and says at least this one might become something. On the channel is The room turns cold, and my breath catches in my throat. My husband, Noah Blake, stiffens beside me, jaw tight, eyes burning. My mother-in-law, Marilyn Hayes, reaches for his arm, steady and firm. My mother, Elaine Blake, stares toward the window, like silence can save her. I do not cry, and I do not argue. I only pull Lily closer. I smile, not because it is funny, but because I finally understand. For 31 years, I have been the invisible child in this family. The helper, the backup plan, the person they call when they need work done. Richard praises my brother Logan Blake for breathing, but forgets I exist. I learned early that approval in this house has a price, and I paid it in chores, favors, and swallowed pain. But today, I have my daughter on my chest, and I feel a line forming inside me. I will not let Lily grow up watching her mother be treated like less. 4 years ago, I discovered something that changed how I see my parents. A final notice was sitting on the kitchen counter, and the mortgage was behind. Richard had retired early, bragging he was comfortable and set. He told everyone our family never needs help and that we handle our own. It was not true. The bills were piling up, and the house was about to be taken. I called Logan, hoping we could share the weight, and he gave excuses. He said money was tight, and he sounded annoyed that I even asked. I could not stand the thought of my mother losing her home, so I made a quiet choice. I went to Marilyn, the one person I trust with hard truth. She listened, and she told me if you help them, you must protect yourself. 2 weeks later, with a financial advisor, I set up a clean monthly transfer. It landed in my parents' checking account like a benefit payment, simple and hard to trace. Richard announced his pension office finally corrected his benefits. He accepted the money with pride, never suspecting it was mine. No one thanked me, because no one knew, and that became my normal. Quiet help, invisible sacrifice, keeping a house standing where my name was never spoken with warmth. Now Richard is in my hospital room, mocking me in front of my newborn. I still feel the old habit pulling me toward silence, but I can taste the truth waiting. I hold Lily, and I look at Noah, and I realize this story is about to change. For as long as I can remember, Richard Blake loved the story of our family. He loved being seen as proud, strong, and self-made, and he loved praising Logan Blake in front of everyone. When I was 27, I finished an advanced nursing certification after months of night classes. I studied between emergency room shifts, and I practiced skills until my hands ached. The day I passed, I called Richard, hoping for one warm sentence. He picked up, paused, and said, "'Tis nice." Then he asked if I heard Logan got promoted, like my news was a speed bump. I swallowed it, the way I always did, and I told myself I did not need his approval. A few months later, we sat at my parents' place for Thanksgiving, the same split-level home they had owned forever. Richard stood up with his glass and made a toast to Logan, calling him the pride of the family. Everyone clinked glasses and smiled. I sat at the far end of the table, near a bowl of mashed potatoes nobody touched. Elaine Blake reached under the table and patted my knee. She whispered, "He does not mean it, sweetie." She did not correct him, and she never did. "That was the pattern," Richard cut. Elaine soothed, and I learned to stay small. Noah Blake kept his head down, but I saw tension in his shoulders. Noah had been helping my parents with repairs for years because he is steady and kind. He fixed a leaky faucet, replaced porch steps, and patched a foundation crack, and Richard barely noticed. One Saturday, Noah drove over to replace a corroded pipe under their kitchen sink. Elaine was out, and Richard was asleep in his recliner. Noah was not snooping, but an envelope from the mortgage company sat on the counter, half hidden under junk mail. The words on the front were hard to miss. Final notice. Noah took a picture and waited for me at home. When he showed me, my chest tightened so fast, it felt like panic. Richard had retired early, bragging that everything was handled. He told everyone we never needed help, and we would never accept charity. The envelope told a different truth, and it had a date stamped in red. Noah asked me if my parents were falling behind, and I could not answer at first. I only knew one thing. I could not watch Elaine lose her home. I could not watch Richard ruin everything, then blame someone else. That night, I lay awake, listening to Noah breathe, and I understood my silence had been training them. If I did nothing, the house would be gone, and Richard's pride would still be louder than reality. The next day, I called Logan Blake, hoping he would step up for once. He sounded annoyed, like my worry was an inconvenience. He said money was tight, and he had his own life, and Richard would figure it out. When I asked if he could at least talk to our parents, he dodged, then ended the call quickly. After that, I did not waste more time begging for responsibility. I went to the one person who never pretends, Marilyn Hayes. Marilyn is Noah's mother, and she spent decades as a certified public accountant. She is the kind of woman who reads a statement once, then sees the whole picture. I sat at her kitchen table and told her everything: the overdue mortgage, the pride, the lies, and my fear that Elaine would lose the only home she has known. Marilyn listened without interrupting, then took off her glasses and set them down carefully. She told me that if I was going to help, I had to do it right. She said I could not let Richard control the story, and I could not let him weaponize gratitude. She introduced me to a financial advisor she trusted, a quiet woman who asked precise questions and promised discretion. Within 2 weeks, they set up a modest trust that routed a monthly transfer from my savings into my parents' checking account. It was not flashy, and it was not emotional. It was clean and practical. On their side, it appeared as a supplemental benefit, like an administrative correction. The first transfer was $2,800, delivered with the cold reliability of a system. Noah held my hand while I signed the final paperwork, and he asked if I was sure. I told him I was not sure about anything, except that I could not let my mother lose her home. When the payment landed, Richard announced that his pension office finally fixed his benefits. He told relatives he knew the system would come through, and he smiled like the hero of his own story. Elaine looked relieved, but she did not ask questions. Logan did not even notice, except to joke that Richard deserved it. Nobody thanked me, because nobody knew. That became the shape of my life, silent support that kept their roof steady while I stayed invisible. The transfers continued each month, and I adjusted my budget to make room. I skipped trips, worked extra shifts, and told myself it was temporary. But Richard's pride did not soften. He still spoke to me like I was background noise, and he still treated Logan like a trophy. I was keeping their house afloat, and I was still the child at the end of the table. Over time, the secret stopped feeling noble and started feeling heavy. I did not want applause. I wanted respect, and I did not know how to ask for it. Then, Lily Blake arrived, and Richard chose the worst possible moment to remind me exactly who he thought I was. The morning Richard Blake mocked my newborn, my body was still shaking from labor. Lily Blake was warm against my chest, tiny and perfect, and I was trying to memorize her face. Richard stood too close, looking down like he was inspecting a purchase. He said, "At least, this one might actually become something," and the cruelty in his voice felt casual. Noah Blake went rigid, fists tightening at his sides. Marilyn Hayes touched Noah's arm, not to excuse Richard, but to keep Noah from exploding in front of nurses. Ellen Blake looked away, eyes fixed on the window, as if the sky could protect her from the truth. I did not argue, because arguing would have fed him. I did not cry, because crying would have rewarded him. I smiled faintly, and held Lily closer, and I watched Richard's expression, waiting for me to break. He wanted the old Samantha, the one who swallows pain and keeps the peace. He wanted me small, so he could feel large. I felt something change inside me, not rage, but clarity. 4 years of transfers ran through my mind like a ledger. 4 years of midnight shifts, skipped rest, and silent saving. 4 years of Richard taking credit for money he never earned. Richard leaned toward the bassinet and made another comment about Lily looks, like she was a joke. Noah took a breath and told him to stop. Richard laughed, then told Noah he was too sensitive. He said Noah should be grateful to be part of the Blake family. Marilyn stepped forward, voice low and even, and told Richard that gratitude is not demanded. She told him that a man who insults a newborn in a hospital room is not strong. He is small. Richard turned on her, and Elaine finally whispered, "Please." Not here. Still, she did not tell Richard he was wrong. That silence hit me harder than his words. I looked at my mother, and I saw years of fear hiding behind manners. A nurse stepped in to check my vitals, and the moment broke into polite movements. Richard smoothed his face and acted charming, like nothing happened. When the nurse left, Richard asked when we would bring Lily to his house, so he could show her off. Show her off, like she was proof of his legacy. Noah said we would decide later, and Richard frowned. He did not like not being in charge. As he walked toward the door, he tossed one last line over his shoulder, telling me I should rest, because motherhood is harder than my little job. That one landed deep, because it erased my work, and it erased my sacrifice. When the door shut, Noah leaned close and asked if I wanted him to confront Richard immediately. Marilyn shook her head once, calm but firm. She said not yet, because timing matters, and truth is strongest when it is delivered clean. I looked down at Lily, and I knew Marilyn was right. I did not want a shouting match. I wanted a reckoning. I wanted Richard to see reality, without room to twist it. I whispered to Noah that we would wait. Then we would choose the moment. And as I said it, I felt the secret in my pocket grow heavier, like it was ready to become a weapon. The day after Richard Blake's words, I kept my voice soft, and my face calm. Nurses came in and out, checking me, checking Lily Blake, and making sure we were stable. Noah Blake stayed close, watching every doorway like he was guarding us. Marilyn Hayes brought food, folded baby clothes, and spoke in short sentences that kept me grounded. When Elaine Blake returned that afternoon, she acted like nothing happened. She asked about my stitches, then asked if Lily was eating well, and her eyes stayed wet. I wanted to ask why she never stopped him, but the hospital room was not the place. Richard did not come back, and I could tell he thought the insult was finished business. Noah asked if we should cut contact immediately, but I told him not yet because I needed my body to heal first. I also needed the timing to be clean and impossible to twist. Marilyn agreed, and she reminded me that Richard thrives on drama. If we gave him noise, he would turn it into a story where he is the victim. I did not want noise. I wanted facts, and a quiet end to the lie. 2 days later, we were discharged. Noah drove slowly, careful with every turn, while Lily slept in the back seat. At home, we kept the lights low and moved like we were in a fragile museum. That first night, Richard sent a message to Noah, asking when he could meet Lily properly. He did not ask how I was recovering, and he did not apologize. Noah wanted to answer sharply, but Marilyn told him to wait. She said, "Richard, is already stepping toward the baby, because a baby is attention, and attention is his fuel. The next morning, I opened my laptop and pulled up the trust documents. I read the terms again, and I checked the account history month after month, steady and quiet. The amounts were there in plain sight, and I felt anger rise, then settle into resolve. I told Noah that I wanted a family dinner at my parents' house, not a fight, a meeting. I wanted Elaine there. I wanted Logan Blake there, and I wanted Marilyn there as a witness. Noah asked if I was sure, and I said yes, because Lily deserves a mother who ends cycles. Marilyn called a friend who knows family law and asked for simple guidance. The advice was direct: document everything, speak calmly, and do not threaten. That weekend, I sent Elaine a message saying we would come by for a short visit. Elaine replied quickly, sounding relieved, as if she thought this meant everything would return to normal. Richard replied separately to Noah, saying he expects respect in his home. Noah showed me the message, and I smiled once, because the house he called his had been saved by money he never earned. We arrived at my parents' house just before 6, carrying Lily Blake in her carrier. The porch light was on, and Elaine Blake opened the door with nervous energy. She kissed my cheek, then stared at Lily like she was trying to memorize her. Richard Blake stepped in behind her, smiling wide, acting like a proud grandfather. He reached for the carrier, and Noah Blake shifted his body slightly, keeping space. Richard laughed and said, "Noah is overprotective," then turned to me and said, "You always were sensitive." Logan Blake was already in the living room, leaning back like he belonged there. He stood up, glanced at Lily, and said she looks fine, then returned to his phone. Marilyn Hayes arrived right after us, holding a small casserole and a calm expression. Richard looked surprised to see her, then recovered fast and called her a guest, like he was doing her a favor. We sat at the dining table, and Elaine served food with shaking hands. Richard launched into stories about himself, talking about retirement, talking about wisdom, talking about how hard it was to raise children. He did not mention the hospital insult, and he did not ask about my recovery. When I spoke about labor and the fear I felt, Richard interrupted to say women have been doing this forever. Noah kept his tone controlled, but I could hear anger under the surface. Logan asked Richard if he could borrow the truck next weekend, and Richard agreed immediately, smiling like Logan asked for the moon. Elaine watched me, waiting for my reaction, and I realized she already knew something was coming. Halfway through dinner, Richard lifted his glass and made a toast. He said, "Family is everything, and that children owe their parents gratitude." He looked at me as he said it, and his smile carried a warning. Marilyn set down her fork and looked at him without blinking. She asked Richard a simple question. "Do you feel proud that you never take handouts?" Richard laughed and said, "Of course, I earned everything I have." Marilyn nodded slowly, then said, "That is good, because we are here to talk about the money you have been receiving." The table went silent, and Elaine froze with her fork mid-air. Richard's smile tightened, and he asked what money. Marilyn turned her gaze to me, giving me the floor. I placed my hand on Lily Carrier, steadying myself, and I said, "There is something you need to know, and you need to hear it all at once." Richard tried to interrupt, but Noah held up one hand and said, "Let her speak." Logan finally looked up, confused, then annoyed. "I told them 4 years ago. I saw the mortgage notice. I told them the house was close to foreclosure, and nobody was telling the truth." Richard's face reddened, and he said, "That is a lie." Then he looked at Elaine, demanding support. Elaine looked down, and her silence answered for her. I told Richard that I set up a monthly transfer that looked like a benefit payment. I told him it went into his checking account every month like clockwork. Richard opened his mouth, then shut it, like the air had changed. Logan leaned forward and asked, "What are you talking about?" Marilyn slid a printed ledger across the table, plain and clean, with dates and amounts written in words. Richard stared at it, then pushed it away, as if paper could insult him. Elaine began to cry quietly, hands trembling. I did not raise my voice. I only said, "You mocked my newborn, in a room where I was still bleeding, while you have been living under a roof I kept from collapsing." Richard Blake stood up so fast his chair scraped the floor. He said, "This is ridiculous," and he demanded to know what kind of trick this was. Marilyn Hayes stayed seated, calm as stone, and told him to check his account. Richard looked around like he expected someone to laugh, but no one did. Elaine Blake covered her mouth, eyes shining, and Logan Blake muttered that this is insane. Noah Blake kept his hand on my shoulder, grounding me as my heart pounded. Richard grabbed his phone and started tapping, jaw tight, breath loud. He opened his banking app, then hesitated, because he did not like not knowing. Marilyn told him where to look, and she spoke like she was giving instructions to a client. Richard scrolled, and his face shifted, first confusion, then disbelief, then a sharp kind of fear. He saw the monthly deposits, labeled like a benefit adjustment, arriving again and again. He clicked into details, and he saw the routing information that matched the trust. His mouth opened slightly, then closed, like he could not find the right insult. Elaine whispered, "Richard, please," and he snapped at her to be quiet. Logan leaned over Richard's shoulder, and his eyes widened as he read. He looked at me like I had changed species. He asked why you never told me, and I answered because you never wanted the burden. You wanted the praise. Logan flinched, and his face hardened into anger, but he did not deny it. Richard tried to regain control by shouting, "No!" He said, "You should have told me. You should have asked permission. You made me look foolish." Marilyn replied that his pride is not the emergency, his cruelty is. Richard turned on me and said, "You did this to manipulate us. You did it to buy power." I told him I did it to save Elaine home and to keep a roof over her head. Elaine began to sob, and she said she knew something was helping, but she was afraid to ask. That confession landed like a weight, because it meant she accepted comfort without demanding truth. Richard pointed at Noah and accused him of using me, and Noah answered with a steady voice. He said, "Samantha did this alone, and you took credit for it, and then you insulted her baby." Richard then tried a softer tone, switching like a light. He said he was joking in the hospital. He said, "People are too sensitive now." He said he did not mean it. I looked at him and told him, "Jokes do not cut that deep." And love does not sound like contempt. Marilyn leaned forward and said, "The monthly transfer stops tonight." Richard shouted no, and he said, "You cannot do that to family." I said I can, because family does not mock a newborn, and family does not demand money as tribute. Richard's face twisted, and he said, "If you stop it, you will destroy us." I answered that the truth is, he destroyed respect a long time ago, and I simply stopped paying to hide it. Then I lifted Lily Carrier and stood slowly, feeling my body protest, but my voice stayed steady. I told them, "We are leaving now, and we will contact you when we decide what a safe relationship looks like." Elaine reached out, but her hands stayed empty. Logan stared at the table, and Richard stood in the middle of the room, holding his phone like a broken mirror. When we got home, the house felt too quiet for my heartbeat. Lily Blake slept in her bassinet, breathing soft and steady. Noah Blake locked the doors, then checked the windows twice, like it could keep the past out. Marilyn Hayes made tea, then sat with me at the kitchen table. She told me I did not do anything wrong, and she said I handled it clean. I wanted to believe her, but my hands kept shaking. That night, my phone started buzzing, slow at first, then constant. Elaine Blake called 3 times, then left a voicemail that sounded broken. She said she never wanted this, and she begged me to talk. Logan Blake sent a message that was pure anger, saying I humiliated Dad. Then he added that I should have warned him, because now he looks stupid too. Richard Blake did not text at all, and that silence felt like the most predictable thing. Noah read the messages, and his jaw tightened, but he stayed calm. Marilyn reminded us that the first wave is always control. They try to pull you back fast. She suggested we respond once, short and factual, then stop. I wrote a brief message to Elaine, saying I love you, but I need time. I told her the monthly transfer is ending, and I will not be threatened. Then I turned my phone off. The next morning, Noah showed me social media posts from relatives. Someone had posted about ungrateful children, and the comments were full of guesses. The story was already being rewritten, and it was not even 24 hours old. Marilyn told me not to chase it, and she was right. We had a newborn, and we had our peace to protect. Still, my body reacted like danger was near, because my family trained me to fear disapproval. Later that afternoon, an unknown number called. When I answered, it was an aunt, speaking gently but pointed. She said, "Richard is devastated, and I should apologize for making a scene." I told her I did not make a scene. I told the truth. I said Richard insulted my newborn, and he has been accepting my money for years. My aunt went silent, then asked if that was real. I said yes, and I offered to show proof if needed. The call ended quickly. Noah held Lily, and he told me he is proud of me. I started crying, not loudly, but in a quiet way that feels like release. Marilyn placed a hand on my shoulder and said, "This is grief, not regret." She said I am grieving the father I wanted, and the respect I should have had all along. I looked at Lily, and I understood that the price of peace is sometimes distance. 2 days later, Richard Blake showed up at our door. He came alone, and he looked smaller than usual. Noah Blake checked the camera first, then asked me what I wanted. My chest tightened, but my voice stayed steady. I said we can speak outside for 5 minutes with Marilyn Hayes present. Noah opened the door, and Richard stood on the porch holding a paper bag. He said he brought a gift for Lily Blake, like a toy could erase a wound. Marilyn stepped out beside me, calm and unblinking. Richard tried to smile, then he cleared his throat. He said he had a rough couple of days, and he did not expect that dinner. He said he felt blindsided, and he said I embarrassed him. The first thing he protected was his pride, and that told me everything. I asked him why he mocked my newborn in the hospital. Richard shrugged, then said it was a joke, and everyone is too sensitive. Noah took a step forward, and Richard backed up slightly. Marilyn told Richard that jokes do not target babies, and jokes do not humiliate new mothers. Richard shifted, then tried a softer voice. He said he is sorry if I took it the wrong way. I looked at him and said, I did not take it wrong. You said it with contempt. Richard's face tightened, and he asked if the money is truly stopping. I said, yes. It ends now. Richard tried bargaining, saying we can move on, and he will be nicer. He said, Elaine Blake is stressed, and the house needs stability. Marilyn asked him if he knows how much Samantha has paid over 4 years. Richard did not answer, because he did not want to say it out loud. Marilyn said it anyway, and her tone did not change. She said the help was a lifeline, and he treated the person holding it like dirt. Richard then turned toward me, and his eyes looked wet for a second. He said he never knew how to talk to me, because I always handled things. I said I handled things because you demanded it, and because Elaine stayed quiet. Richard flinched, then he said he wants to see Lily. I said no, not right now. I told him my child is not a trophy for your image. Richard's jaw clenched, and anger flashed. He said, "You are punishing me." I answered that I am protecting my daughter and protecting myself. Marilyn told Richard that if he wants a relationship later, he will start by respecting boundaries. Richard looked like he wanted to argue. Then he swallowed it. He placed the gift bag on the porch step, and he said, "Fine. Do what you want." Then he walked away without looking back. Noah closed the door, and we stood in silence. Marilyn said the apology was not real, because it came with conditions. She told me not to confuse discomfort with change. I picked up Lily, kissed her forehead, and felt certain. If Richard wants access, he will earn it with respect, not demands. The next day, Elaine Blake asked to meet at a small cafe near our house. She sounded nervous, and she promised she would come alone. Oh, I agreed. But Noah Blake and Marilyn Hayes sat at a table nearby, close enough to see us. Elaine arrived with red eyes and trembling hands. She reached for my fingers, then pulled back like she was afraid I would reject her. She whispered that she is sorry, and she said she should have stopped Richard Blake years ago. I asked her why she stayed quiet in the hospital, and why she stayed quiet at dinner. Elaine stared at her cup, then said she spent her whole marriage avoiding his anger. She said if she challenged him, he would punish her with cold silence, and she learned to survive by smoothing things over. I told her survival is not the same as love, and it does not excuse leaving me alone. Elaine nodded, tears falling. She admitted she suspected the money was not from Richard's pension. She said she saw deposits that did not make sense, and she asked Richard once. He snapped at her, and she backed down. Elaine said she was relieved the house was safe, and she did not want to know the cost. Hearing that hurt, because it meant she accepted comfort built on my silence. Elaine asked if the payments could continue for just a little while, until they figure things out. I told her no, because that would keep the lie alive. I said, "I will help you plan, but I will not keep funding denial." Elaine looked scared. Then she whispered that Logan Blake is furious. She said Logan called me selfish and he said I ruined Dad. I asked what Logan offered to do now, and Elaine hesitated. She said Logan did not offer money. He only offered opinions. At that moment, Logan walked into the cafe, uninvited. He saw us, then came straight over, face hard. He told Elaine they should not be here, and he told me I'm tearing the family apart. I asked him if he wants to cover the mortgage now, and his eyes flickered. He said that is not the point. I told him it is exactly the point, because he enjoyed the roof too. Noah stood and walked over, calm but firm. He told Logan to stop, and he told him that Lily Blake is not a bargaining chip. Logan sneered, then said, "I have always been dramatic." Marilyn stepped closer and asked Logan one question. She asked if he ever once asked how Samantha was managing, while she kept their home afloat. Logan looked away, then muttered that Samantha chose to do it. I answered, "That is the lie you all told yourselves so you could stay comfortable." Logan turned red, then left in a rush, as if facts burned. Elaine watched him go. Then she looked back at me. She said she wants to change, but she is afraid. I told her, fear is not a plan, and silence is not love. I said, if she wants a relationship with me and Lily, she will start by being honest, and by stopping Richard when he is cruel. Elaine nodded slowly, and for the first time I saw a tiny piece of strength in her face. After the cafe, the pressure did not slow. It multiplied. My phone filled with messages from cousins, aunts, and people I only see at funerals. Some wrote that family is family, and money should not break love. Others demanded that I apologize to Richard Blake, because he is the father and deserves respect. Noah Blake read them and shook his head, because none of them asked what Richard said in my hospital room. Marilyn Hayes reminded me that when a family system is built on denial, the person who tells the truth becomes the villain. We decided to send one clear statement to a few key relatives, then stop engaging. I wrote that Richard mocked my newborn, and that I had been quietly preventing foreclosure for 4 years. I said I ended the transfers, and I asked for privacy. Most people ignored the message, but a few replied with shock, asking for proof. Marilyn helped me prepare a simple page of dates and amounts, written in words, without exposing account numbers. When I shared that, the tone changed. Some relatives went silent. Some apologized. Others doubled down, saying I should have told Richard sooner. That excuse made my jaw tighten because it placed responsibility on the person being used. 2 evenings later, Richard showed up at Elaine Blake's house, furious, and he started calling relatives, demanding they stop taking my side. Elaine told me he paced the living room, shouting that I ruined his reputation. He did not shout about losing me, he shouted about looking foolish. Logan Blake joined him, and according to Elaine, Logan poured fuel on it. Logan told Richard that I had turned Noah against the family, and that Marilyn is controlling me. Hearing that, I felt sadness more than anger. Logan was still protecting his position, not his sister. That night, Richard left me a voicemail. His voice was loud and sharp, and he said, "I am ungrateful, and I am a traitor." He said he will tell everyone that Noah and Marilyn forced me to do this. He said, if I do not reverse it, he will take me to court. Marilyn listened to the message with a flat expression, then told me Richard has no case. She said, "The trust was mine, and the money was mine, and ending it is legal." She also said the threats matter, because they show intent. She advised Noah to save every message, every voicemail, every visit. Noah created a folder on our computer, and he backed everything up. I hated that it came to documentation, but I understood why. Richard is not fighting for connection. He is fighting for control. That night, while Lily Blake slept, I sat in the nursery chair and felt the weight of what I was doing. I was not only ending a payment, I was ending a role. And roles do not die quietly. They fight on the way out. The following Sunday, Elaine Blake asked if I would meet her and Richard Blake at church after the service. She said Richard agreed to stay calm, and she sounded desperate for peace. I did not trust him, but I agreed to a public meeting, with Noah Blake and Marilyn Hayes nearby. We sat on a bench outside, with sunlight and people moving around us. Richard arrived late, like he wanted to make an entrance. He sat down hard, looked at Lily Blake in her stroller, and said she is a pretty baby. It sounded like a compliment, but it felt like a performance. Then he turned to me and said we need to fix this, because the mortgage is due. He did not ask how I was healing, and he did not ask if I was sleeping. He asked about the bill. I told him calmly that the transfers are over. Richard exhaled like he was angry at a stubborn machine. He said I owe him because he raised me, fed me, and put a roof over my head. Marilyn asked him if he remembers who has been keeping that roof for 4 years. Richard ignored her, and he leaned toward me, voice lowering. He said if I restart the payments, he will apologize properly, and he will be nicer to Noah. Noah's jaw tightened, but he stayed silent, letting me speak. Nod to me, Adsenor, Adseonois. I told Richard that an apology is not a transaction. I told him he insulted my child, and he treated me like I was less, for decades. Richard shook his head, then said, "You are overreacting." It was one comment. Elaine stared at her hands, and she whispered, "Please, stop." Richard then looked at Lily and said, "A baby does not understand words anyway." That sentence made my skin go cold, because it proved he still did not get it. I told him a baby may not understand words, but a mother understands disrespect. Richard's face hardened, and he switched to threat again. He said he will tell everyone I abandoned them, and he will make sure I feel it. Marilyn leaned forward and told him that harassment will be handled through legal channels. Richard scoffed and said you would sue your own family. I said I will protect my family, and my family is Noah and Lily. Richard looked stunned, like he never imagined I would say it out loud. Elaine started crying, saying she just wants us together. I told Elaine that together is not possible without respect. I told Richard he will not see Lily until he can speak with basic decency. Richard stood up, and his voice rose, drawing attention. A few people glanced over. Richard said, I am poisoning his grandchild against him. Noah finally spoke, and his voice was low and controlled. He told Richard that Lily is not poison, and Samantha is not your property. Richard stared at him, then stormed off, leaving Elaine shaking on the bench. Marilyn stood, and she told Elaine that peace cannot be built on Samantha's silence anymore. 2 weeks passed, and something unexpected happened. Elaine Blake started changing, slowly, but visibly. She began answering relatives with facts instead of excuses. She told one aunt that Richard Blake insulted Lily Blake in the hospital. She told another cousin that Samantha had been paying the mortgage indirectly for 4 years. Each time she spoke the truth, she sounded shaky, but she did it anyway. Richard hated it. He told Elaine she was embarrassing him, and he called her weak. For the first time, Elaine did not fold. She told him that weakness is letting your daughter be treated like a servant. When she told me this, her voice trembled, but there was steel underneath. Meanwhile, Logan Blake started feeling the ground shift. Without my secret money, my parents began cutting costs. Richard complained about selling a second car. Elaine stopped paying for Logan's streaming subscriptions and random expenses. Logan called me one night, voice sharp, saying I am destroying mom health with stress. I asked him if he was sending money to help. He went quiet, then said you are always about money. I told him money is the only language Richard respected for years, and I was done speaking. Logan then blamed Noah Blake, saying Noah is controlling me. I told Logan that Noah supports me, and he never asked for a cent. Logan laughed bitterly and said, that is what he wants you to think. Marilyn Hayes heard the call on speaker, and she asked Logan one question. She asked if he ever once offered to split the mortgage when he thought Dad's pension was fixed. Logan muttered that he did not know. Marilyn replied that he did not ask, because comfort made him lazy. Logan hung up. After that, he started posting online about loyalty and betrayal, vague messages aimed at me. The posts did not get the sympathy he expected, because some relatives now knew the truth. A cousin commented asking if Logan planned to help financially now. Logan deleted the comment. That small moment felt like sunlight through clouds. It showed that the old story was losing power. One afternoon, Elaine visited my house alone. She looked tired, but determined. She told me she opened the bank statements herself for the first time in years. She said she saw the deposits month after month, and she realized she had been living inside Richard illusion. She apologized again, and this time it sounded different. She did not ask me to restart payments. She asked me how she could make amends. I told her to keep choosing truth, and to stop defending cruelty. Elaine nodded, and she asked if she could hold Lily just for a minute. I watched her hands tremble as she cradled my daughter, and I saw real love on her face. Noah stood nearby, protective but calm. Marilyn watched too, eyes soft. That day I realized that change is possible, but it is not gifted, it is earned. A few days after Elaine Blake held Lily Blake, Richard Blake tried a new strategy, and it was almost predictable. He did not come to me directly, and he did not approach Noah Blake either. He went to Marilyn Hayes because he assumed older people speak the same language, and he assumed she could be pressured. Marilyn told me later that Richard called her, using a polite voice that sounded borrowed. He praised her for being practical, then said the family needed a solution. He asked if she could convince me to restart the support, and he promised to behave better. Marilyn let him talk, and she did not interrupt, because she wanted him to reveal himself. Richard kept going, and he said he would apologize, but only if the money returned. He said it was embarrassing to be short on cash, and it was unfair that I held the power. Marilyn replied with one calm sentence: "Samantha does not hold power. Samantha holds boundaries." Richard got irritated, and he tried to shame her. He said she was tearing apart a family, and she should remember her place. Marilyn told him that her place is beside the truth, and she will not trade it for comfort. Richard then raised his voice and said he would tell people Marilyn was manipulating me. Marilyn told him to tell whoever he wants, because bank statements do not change. After the call, Marilyn sent me a short message saying he is not sorry, he is scared. That night, Logan Blake tried texting Noah, claiming he wanted peace. Noah did not answer, because peace offered by someone who benefits from chaos is never peace. The next morning, a neighbor told us that Richard had been asking questions, trying to learn our schedule. My stomach tightened, and Noah checked our cameras again. We did not panic, but we took it seriously, because entitlement can become reckless when it loses access. Marilyn advised us to keep documenting and to keep our responses minimal. Elaine called me that afternoon, voice shaky, and she said Richard was furious that she visited. She said he accused her of betraying him, and he demanded she cut contact with me. Elaine told him no, and according to her, he slammed a door hard enough to rattle the frame. Hearing that made me sad, but it also showed me something. Richard was losing the ability to control people with noise alone. No, that evening, I held Lily in the quiet nursery light, and I felt a strange peace. My father was still the same man, but I was not the same daughter. I was no longer a secret bank account, hiding behind family pride. One weekend, Logan Blake asked Noah Blake to meet for coffee, saying he wanted to clear the air. Noah told me first, and we agreed he could go, as long as it stayed public and short. Marilyn Hayes offered to come, but Noah said he could handle it. Noah met Logan at a busy shop near the main road, in full daylight. Logan arrived late and sat down with a sigh, like he was the one burdened. He started by saying he missed his sister. Then he shifted quickly to complaining about Richard Blake's stress. Logan said, "Dad is not sleeping, Mom is crying, and everyone blames me now." Noah listened without reacting, then asked one simple question. Noah asked Logan if he plans to help financially, now that the truth is out. Logan laughed and said money is not everything. Noah replied that money became everything when Samantha was paying it, and nobody complained then. Logan leaned in and lowered his voice, as if he was offering a deal. He said if Samantha restarts the transfers for 6 months, Richard will calm down, and then we can all move on. Noah told him that moving on does not require payment. It requires accountability. Logan rolled his eyes and said, "You do not understand family dynamics." Noah answered that he understands them too well, because he watched Samantha shrink for years. Logan then tried the attack, blaming Marilyn Hayes, saying she poisoned Samantha against her own father. Noah told Logan that Marilyn did not create the problem, Richard did, and Logan helped by staying comfortable. Logan's face tightened, and he said Samantha chose to do it, and nobody forced her. Noah replied that pressure is not always loud. Sometimes it is years of being treated as less. Logan shifted to guilt, saying Lily Blake deserves grandparents, and Samantha is being cruel. Noah told him Lily deserves safety, and cruelty is not a tradition worth passing down. Logan then admitted something he did not mean to admit. He said the house feels different now, and it is annoying, because Richard is talking about downsizing. Noah asked why that bothers Logan, and Logan hesitated. Then he said, because it will affect me too. That sentence landed like truth, clean and sharp. Logan did not want reconciliation. He wanted the benefits restored. Noah ended the meeting politely and told Logan that if he wants a relationship later, he can start by apologizing to Samantha without asking for money. Logan scoffed and said, "You will regret this." Noah walked out without replying. When Noah told me what happened, I felt grief, but also relief. Logan was not confused. Logan was invested, and that made my choices clearer. As the next mortgage deadline approached, the consequences became visible. Elaine Blake called me one evening, voice quiet, and said Richard Blake finally sat down with the numbers. Without the monthly deposit, the budget did not stretch far enough. Richard tried to pretend it was temporary, but the math did not care about pride. "Elaine," said he, talked about pulling from retirement savings, and he sounded panicked. She said he also talked about taking out a new loan, and she could hear the same denial that caused the problem. Elaine told him no, and she said she would not sign anything without understanding it. That was new, and it made Richard angry. Elaine said he shouted, accusing her of siding with me, and she replied that she is siding with reality. The next day, Richard showed up at my house again, but this time he did not bring gifts. He brought anger and a speech. Noah Blake spoke through the doorbell speaker, telling him to leave. Richard raised his voice, trying to draw attention from neighbors. He said, "Samantha is keeping me from my granddaughter, and she is destroying her own parents." Noah repeated that he must leave. Richard then said something that proved the whole point. He said, "I raised you. You owe me." I stepped close enough to the door to speak, but I did not open it. I told him that parenting is not a loan, and Lily Blake is not collateral. Richard demanded to see Elaine, and I told him Elaine is not here. He called me selfish, and he said I will regret this when I need help. I answered that I already needed help, and he mocked my baby instead. Richard went quiet for a moment, as if searching for a new angle. Then he said, "Fine, if you will not pay, at least sign a document saying you will not interfere with my finances." Marilyn Hayes arrived then, having been alerted by Noah. She told Richard that he is not getting signatures from a postpartum mother on a porch in public. Richard snapped that Marilyn is the problem, and Marilyn replied that the problem is a man who thinks love is an invoice. Richard finally left, but his footsteps were heavy, like defeat disguised as rage. That evening, Elaine came to my house, eyes red, and she said she made a decision. She said she told Richard that if he keeps attacking me, she will leave the house. She said she is tired of being scared and tired of watching her daughter bleed in silence. I did not celebrate because it was painful, but I acknowledged it. I told Elaine that change matters and it will take time. She nodded and she looked at Lily, then back at me, and she whispered that she is sorry for all the years she let it happen. I believed her more than before, because she was finally paying a cost for the truth. A week after Elaine Blake warned Richard Blake, she followed through in a way I did not expect. She did not call me with panic. She called me with a plan. She said she met with a housing counselor at a local nonprofit, and she brought copies of the bank statements. She said she wanted to understand the mortgage, the options, and the truth. Hearing that made my eyes sting, because it meant she was finally stepping out of Richard's shadow. Elaine, said the counselor, explained refinancing was not realistic because their income was not stable enough without the monthly deposits. The counselor also explained the cost of waiting and how fees stack up like bricks. Elaine told me she sat across from Richard and said they either downsize or they lose everything. Richard stared at her like she spoke a foreign language. He said he would never sell, because that would make him look weak. Elaine replied that losing the house would look weaker, and it would hurt more. For the first time, Elaine did not soften her words to protect his pride. She told him she will not lie for him anymore, and she will not blame their daughter to cover his mistakes. Richard tried to shift blame, saying I turned Elaine against him. Elaine said no, Samantha Truth, turned me toward myself. After that conversation, Richard stopped calling me. The silence was not peace. It was sulking, but it still felt like oxygen. Logan Blake tried once to message me, saying we should talk like adults. I replied with one sentence. I will talk when the conversation is respectful and honest. Logan did not respond. Noah Blake and I focused on Lily Blake, on feeding schedules, on sleep, on small routines that build a home. Marilyn Hayes checked in daily, not with pressure, but with steady support. Elaine visited once that week briefly, and she held Lily with a careful tenderness. She did not ask for money, and she did not ask me to fix anything. She only told me she was done enabling cruelty, even if it cost her comfort. That statement mattered more than any apology. In the background, I knew Richard was still angry, still looking for a way to reclaim power. But I also knew something had shifted. Elaine was no longer fully on his side, and that changed the whole balance. At night, I sat in the nursery chair and watched Lily sleep. I thought about how Richard mocked her and how he expected me to accept it. Then I thought about Elaine, learning to say no. It was late, and the house was quiet, and for the first time I felt like the future might not repeat the past. 2 weeks later, Richard Blake asked to meet, and he did it differently. He did not show up at my door, and he did not leave threats. He asked Elaine Blake to call me, and she said he wanted to speak in a public place. Elaine said she would come too, and Marilyn Hayes offered to join as well. Noah Blake and I agreed to meet at a park in the afternoon, with people around and plenty of open space. Richard arrived looking tired, not dramatic, not performing, just worn down. He did not reach for Lily Blake, and he did not demand anything. He stood with his hands in his pockets, eyes on the ground for a moment. Then he looked at me and said he was wrong. He said the hospital comment was cruel, and he said it came from a place of bitterness and ego. He did not say it was a joke, and he did not say I misunderstood. That difference hit me. Richard, said he, did not know the money was from me, and hearing it out loud made him feel ashamed. Marilyn asked him why he never questioned the deposits, and Richard admitted he liked the idea that the system finally recognized him. He admitted he enjoyed telling people he earned it, and he did not want to look closely. Elaine spoke quietly, saying that denial cost our daughter years of respect. Richard nodded, eyes glossy, and he said he treated Samantha like she was less because he assumed she would always stay. He said he saw Logan Blake as his legacy, and he saw Samantha as support. Saying that out loud was ugly, but it was honest. Noah asked Richard what he wanted now. Richard did not mention money. He said he wanted a chance to rebuild trust, and he said he understood if it took time. He said he wanted to meet Lily, but only if I allowed it, and only under my rules. I watched his face closely, looking for the old manipulation, but I did not see it in that moment. I saw regret and fatigue, and something like humility. Still, I did not rush. I told Richard that words matter, but consistency matters more. I told him the financial support is not returning, and that boundary is permanent. Richard nodded and said he accepts it. Elaine exhaled like she had been holding her breath for years. Marilyn told Richard that change is measured in months, not minutes. Richard agreed. More. Then he asked if he could sit with us for a few minutes and simply be present. I said yes, but I kept Lily in her stroller. Richard sat on the bench, hands folded, and he did not perform. For the first time, I felt the possibility of a different future, not guaranteed, but possible. In the weeks after the park meeting, life settled into a calmer rhythm. Lily Blake gained weight, and her eyes began to track faces. Noah Blake returned to work, and Marilyn Hayes helped during the afternoons, cooking simple meals and reminding me to rest. Richard Blake did not call daily, and he did not ask about money. He sent one short message each week asking how Lily was doing and wishing me well. Elaine Blake kept visiting in small, respectful ways, never staying too long, never pushing past my comfort. Logan Blake stayed quiet, and I stopped chasing him. I realized that not everyone grows at the same time, and it is not my job to drag them forward. A month later, Elaine told me they listed the house for sale. She said it was painful, but it was necessary. She said Richard fought it at first, then finally accepted that pride does not pay bills. They found a smaller place nearby, something manageable, something they could afford without fantasy. Elaine said Richard was grieving. Not only the home, but the image he built around it. I understood that grief, because I had been grieving too, grieving the father I wanted, and the brother I hoped for. One afternoon, after weeks of steady behavior, I allowed Richard to hold Lily for the first time. It was in our living room, with Noah and Marilyn present. Richard washed his hands, sat down carefully, and held her like she was fragile. He did not make jokes, and he did not comment on her worth. He looked at her face, and his eyes filled. He whispered that he was sorry, and this time the apology was not loud. It was quiet, and it stayed. I did not forget what happened, and I did not erase the past. But I acknowledged the effort, because that is how change is reinforced. Later, when Richard handed Lily back to me, he did not ask for anything. He only said, "Thank you for letting me be here." That sentence landed in my chest, like a small repair. I still kept boundaries, and I still protected my peace. The trust stayed closed, the payments stayed ended, and the rules stayed clear. Love was no longer tied to rescue. Love was tied to respect, to accountability, and to the daily choice to be better. When I rocked Lily to sleep that night, I thought about the hospital room and the cruelty that started this shift. I realized the story did not change because Richard suddenly became kind. It changed because I stopped accepting less, and I chose my daughter's future over my father's pride.